My name is Charlotte, and I'm 24 years old. 3 months ago, I thought I knew exactly who my family was. I believed love meant unconditional support. I trusted that blood ties created unbreakable bonds. I was naive about many things back then. The call came on a Tuesday morning in October. I was sitting in my cramped studio apartment, eating cereal straight from the box while scrolling through job listings. The lawyer's voice was formal and distant when he told me my grandparents had passed away in a car accident. My heart shattered into a million pieces. Grandma Rose and Grandpa Frank had been my anchors, my safe harbor in every storm. But then he said something that changed everything. "Miss Charlotte, your grandparents have left you their entire estate. You're now worth approximately $26 million. I dropped the phone. The cereal scattered across my hardwood floor like tiny life rafts on an ocean of uncertainty. $26 million. The number felt impossible, surreal, like someone else's fairy tale. Growing up, I knew my grandparents had money. They lived in a beautiful colonial house with perfectly manicured gardens. They took family vacations to Europe every summer. But I never understood the true scope of their wealth. They drove modest cars and wore simple clothes. They clipped coupons and bought generic brands at the grocery store. They lived like people, who worked hard for every dollar. I called my parents immediately. Mom answered on the first ring, her voice tight with barely contained emotion. "Charlotte, honey, we just heard from the lawyer. This is incredible news for our family. Our family, not me. Our family." Dad grabbed the phone. "Charlotte, you need to come home right now. We have a lot to discuss about managing this inheritance responsibly." Something in his tone made my stomach twist. It wasn't grief I heard. It wasn't concern for my emotional state after losing the two most important people in my life. It was calculation. It was hunger. It was the sound of someone seeing dollar signs where there should have been tears. I drove the 3 hours to my hometown in a daze. The autumn leaves blurred past my windshield like watercolor paintings bleeding in the rain. I kept thinking about the last conversation I'd had with Grandma Rose. She'd taken my hands in her weathered ones and said, "Charlotte, sweetheart, you're going to face some difficult choices in life. When that time comes, remember who you are, not who others want you to be." At the time, I thought she was talking about my career struggles or maybe dating advice. Now I wondered if she knew something I didn't. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you are viewing from. Before I tell you about this life-changing decision, hit like and subscribe to hear more real stories about family loyalty and betrayal that might just change how you see your own relationships. The family meeting was scheduled for the next evening. As I pulled into my childhood driveway, I saw cars I didn't recognize. Uncle Mark's BMW sat beside Aunt Lisa's Mercedes. Cousin David's pickup truck was parked on the street. Even my estranged Uncle Robert had made the trip from California. The whole extended family had somehow learned about the inheritance and assembled like vultures circling fresh prey. Mom greeted me at the door with a hug that felt different somehow. Too tight, too long, too desperate. "Oh, honey, isn't this wonderful? Grandma and Grandpa would want us to be smart about this money. As a family unit." Family unit. Another phrase that made my skin crawl. I walked into our living room and found 15 family members sitting in a semicircle, all eyes fixed on me like I was some kind of lottery ticket they were hoping to cash in. The grief I expected to find was nowhere to be seen. Instead, I saw anticipation, excitement, and barely disguised greed. My cousin Sarah stood up and hugged me. "Charlotte, I'm so sorry for your loss, but wow, what an opportunity this is for everyone. Everyone. Not me. Everyone." That's when I realized something fundamental had shifted. I wasn't Charlotte anymore, the struggling recent graduate trying to find her place in the world. I wasn't their beloved granddaughter, daughter, niece, or cousin. I was a bank account with legs. I was 26 million reasons for people to suddenly care about my well-being. The weight of their expectations settled on my shoulders like a lead blanket. I looked around the room at faces I'd known my entire life, and for the first time, I felt completely alone. To understand what happened next, you need to know about my family dynamics before the money changed everything. We weren't close in, the way families are supposed to be close. We were more like distant acquaintances who shared DNA and holiday obligations. My parents, Richard and Susan, are successful professionals. Dad's a corporate lawyer, Mom's a real estate agent. They've always measured love through achievement and financial success. Growing up, every conversation centered around grades, college applications, career prospects, and earning potential. Emotional support was a luxury they couldn't afford to provide. When I graduated with a liberal arts degree instead of business or law, their disappointment was palpable. When I struggled to find work in my field, their frustration turned into lectures about practical choices and realistic expectations. They loved me, but it was conditional love wrapped in judgment and disappointment. My relationship with my grandparents was completely different. Grandma Rose taught me to bake cookies and listen to old jazz records. Grandpa Frank showed me how to tend gardens and appreciate simple pleasures. They asked about my dreams, not my income. They cared about my happiness, not my resume. Every Sunday, I'd drive to their house for dinner. We'd sit around their worn wooden table, and they'd ask about my week, my hopes, my fears. They never pressured me to be anything other than myself. In their presence, I felt valued for who I was, not what I could produce. Uncle Mark is Dad's older brother, a successful surgeon with an ego the size of Texas. He's always treated me like an amusing child, patting my head condescendingly and making jokes about my career struggles. His wife, Aunt Jennifer, is a former beauty queen who now runs a boutique. They live in a mansion and drive luxury cars, but they're always complaining about money. Aunt Lisa is Mom's sister, a divorced single mother of 2 teenage boys. She works as a nurse and struggles financially. Unlike Mark, her interest in money comes from genuine need, not greed. Her son David is 22 and drowning in student loans. Her younger son Michael is 17 and dreams of college, but worries about affording it. Then there's Uncle Robert, Dad's black sheep brother who moved to California 15 years ago. He's an artist who's never sold a painting and works odd jobs to pay rent. He's always been kind to me, understanding what it feels like to disappoint the family's expectations. Cousin Sarah is Uncle Mark's daughter, 26 years old, and fresh out of medical school. She's drowning in student debt but maintains an expensive lifestyle to keep up appearances. She's always been competitive with me, probably because we're close in age, and I represent the path she might have taken if she'd been braver. My extended family also includes Aunt Patricia, Mom's older sister, who's married to a wealthy businessman, but has expensive tastes that outpace even their substantial income. Their daughter Kelly is my age and works in marketing, constantly posting about luxury vacations she can't actually afford. The family hierarchy has always been clear. The successful ones get respect and attention. The struggling ones get lectures and judgment. I've always been firmly in the second category, the family disappointment who chose passion over practicality. But my grandparents saw something different in me. They appreciated my creativity, my empathy, my willingness to take risks. They understood that success isn't always measured in dollar signs. They valued character over capital, integrity over income. During our last conversation, Grandpa Frank had said something that stuck with me. "Charlotte, sweetie, you're the only one in this family who hasn't lost sight of what really matters." That's why Rose and I trust you with things we can't trust the others with. I thought he meant family recipes or old photographs. I never imagined he meant $26 million. Looking back, I can see the signs I missed. The way they'd change the subject when other family members asked about their finances. The private meetings with lawyers that they never discussed. The careful way they'd ask about my relationship with my parents and uncles. Have you ever felt like the odd one out in your own family? Let me know in the comments, because that's exactly how I felt walking into that living room full of relatives who suddenly saw me very differently. My grandparents had given me more than money. They'd given me a test of character, integrity, and strength that I didn't even know I was taking. The family meeting began with Dad clearing his throat like he was about to deliver a boardroom presentation. Now, Charlotte, we all know you're not experienced in handling large sums of money. This inheritance comes with enormous responsibility and tax implications you couldn't possibly understand on your own. Uncle Mark nodded sagely. As the family's financial expert, I think we should establish a trust fund with multiple family members as trustees. That way, we can ensure the money is managed properly for everyone's benefit. Everyone's benefit. There it was again. Aunt Lisa leaned forward, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Charlotte, honey, you know how much I've struggled since. The divorce. David's student loans are crushing him, and Michael needs college funding. Your grandparents would want you to help family in need. The emotional manipulation was so obvious it made my teeth ache. But what surprised me was how easily everyone fell into their assigned roles. Mark played the financial advisor. Lisa played the struggling single mother. Patricia played the concerned elder. Sarah played the responsible medical professional. They had choreographed this performance before I even arrived. I think we should take some time to process this, I said carefully. I just lost the two most important people in my life. I need space to grieve before making any major decisions. Dad's jaw tightened. Charlotte, we don't have the luxury of time. Estate taxes, investment decisions, legal paperwork. These things can't wait for your emotional processing. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Jake, my best friend since college. How are you holding up? I know how much your grandparents meant to you. The simple kindness of his message hit me like a physical force. Here was someone asking about my emotional well-being instead of my bank account balance. Someone who cared about Charlotte the person, not Charlotte, the inheritance. I need some air, I announced, standing abruptly. Outside on the porch, I called Jake back. I don't know what to do, I whispered. It's like they're all speaking a different language, and that language is money. What do you mean? Jake asked gently. I told him about the meeting, about the trust fund proposal, about the way everyone seemed to have predetermined how my inheritance should be divided. Jake listened without interrupting, something my family had never learned to do. Charlotte, he said finally, what did your grandparents actually say in their will? Not what your family is telling you they meant, but what they actually wrote. That was a question nobody had asked yet. Everyone assumed they knew what Grandma Rose and Grandpa Frank intended. But I realized I'd never read the actual document myself. When I went back inside, I announced that I wanted to review the will personally before discussing any family arrangements. The room went silent in a way that felt heavy and uncomfortable. Charlotte, Mom said with strained patience, you don't need to burden yourself with legal documents. We've already had them reviewed by Mark's financial advisor. I want to read them myself, I repeated firmly. Uncle Robert spoke up for the first time. I think that's smart, Charlotte. You should understand exactly what your grandparents wanted before making any decisions. The look Dad shot him could have frozen fire. Robert had always been the family rebel, the one who asked uncomfortable questions and refused to play by established rules. In that moment, I felt grateful for his presence. Cousin Sarah tried a different approach. Charlotte, I know this is overwhelming, but think about the family legacy. Grandma and Grandpa would want their money to strengthen family bonds, not create division. The irony was staggering. They were creating division while claiming to prevent it. They were weakening bonds while insisting they wanted to strengthen them. That night, I stayed at my parents' house in my old childhood bedroom. The walls were covered with participation trophies and photographs of family vacations, where I remembered feeling lonely, even surrounded by relatives. Looking at those pictures now, I could see the patterns I'd missed as a child. The way my parents always stood slightly apart from Grandma Rose and Grandpa Frank. The forced smiles that never reached anyone's eyes except mine and my grandparents. I called the lawyer and scheduled a private meeting for the next morning. I needed to understand what my grandparents actually wanted, not what everyone else claimed they wanted. If you've ever been pressured to make a decision that didn't feel right, you know the feeling I'm describing. Drop a comment and share your experience because I could have used that support back then. The lawyer's office smelled like leather and old books. Mr. Henderson, my grandparents' attorney for 30 years, spread the documents across his mahogany desk like he was revealing sacred texts. His kind eyes crinkled with something between sympathy and admiration. Your grandparents spent months crafting this will, he said gently. They were very specific about their intentions. As I read through the legal language, the truth became crystal clear. The inheritance wasn't meant to be shared. It wasn't intended as family wealth. It was specifically, intentionally, completely mine. But more importantly, there was a letter attached that made their reasoning devastatingly clear. My dearest Charlotte, Grandma Rose had written in her careful handwriting, if you're reading this, then Frank and I are gone, and you're probably feeling overwhelmed by both grief and responsibility. We want you to know that this decision wasn't made lightly. We've watched our family for years, and we've seen how money changes people, how it brings out their worst impulses and hidden resentments. We've seen how your parents measure worth, through bank accounts rather than character. We've watched your uncles and aunts turn family gatherings into competitions over status and possessions, but you, sweetheart, have remained true to yourself despite their pressure to conform to their values. You've chosen authenticity over approval, creativity over cash, love over luxury. That's why we trust you with this inheritance. Not because we want to burden you, but because we believe you're the only one who won't let it corrupt your soul. Use this money to build the life you want, not the life others expect you to want. And remember, saying no to family sometimes means saying yes to yourself. I sat in that office and cried for 20 minutes, not because of the money, but because my grandparents had seen me, really seen me, in a way my own parents never had. They understood that I'd been fighting an uphill battle for authenticity my entire life. When I returned home, the family was waiting with barely contained impatience. They'd clearly spent the morning discussing strategy and making plans for my inheritance. So, Dad said, rubbing his hands together, did you get the legal paperwork sorted out for the trust fund? I took a deep breath and pulled out the letter. I want to read you something Grandma Rose wrote. As I read her words aloud, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. By the time I finished, several people were staring at the floor. Others were exchanging uncomfortable glances, and Mom looked like she'd been slapped. That's ridiculous, Uncle Mark sputtered. She was clearly not thinking straight when she wrote that. Elderly people sometimes make irrational decisions. Are you calling our mother irrational? Mom snapped, her real estate agent diplomacy finally cracking. I'm calling this situation impractical, Mark shot back. Charlotte can't handle this kind of responsibility. She doesn't have the experience or maturity. Aunt Lisa tried a softer approach. "Charlotte, honey, family takes care of family. Your grandparents wouldn't want you to be selfish with this blessing." Selfish. The word hit like a physical blow. Wanting to honor my grandparents' explicitly stated wishes was somehow selfish. Refusing to redistribute my inheritance to relatives who'd shown me nothing but conditional love was apparently greed. "I'm going to do exactly what Grandma Rose and Grandpa Frank wanted," I said quietly. "I'm going to keep the inheritance and use it to build my own life." The explosion was immediate and spectacular. Dad accused me of being ungrateful and naive. Mom cried about family loyalty and shared responsibility. Uncle Mark threatened to contest the will. Aunt Lisa guilted me about her children's futures. Sarah called me selfish and immature. Only Uncle Robert remained quiet, watching the chaos with sad, knowing eyes. Finally, I stood up. "I'm leaving now. When you're ready to have a relationship with me that isn't about money, you know how to reach me." The silence that followed was deafening. As I walked toward the door, Mom grabbed my arm. "Charlotte, if you leave now, you're choosing money over family." I looked into her eyes and saw a stranger. "No, Mom. I'm choosing self-respect over manipulation. There's a difference. Have you ever had to choose between family approval and personal integrity? If so, you understand the weight of that moment. Let me know in the comments because that support means everything." I drove away from my childhood home knowing I might never be welcome there again. The first 3 months after that confrontation were the loneliest of my life. My phone stopped ringing. Family group texts went silent. Holiday invitations disappeared. It was like I'd been erased from the family tree with surgical precision. But something interesting happened in that silence. I started to breathe again. Without the constant pressure to justify my choices, defend my decisions, or apologize for my existence, I discovered who I actually was underneath all that family conditioning. I moved to a different city, bought a modest house with a garden that reminded me of Grandpa Frank's, and enrolled in graduate school to study art therapy. The money gave me freedom, but not in the way my family assumed. It wasn't about luxury cars or designer clothes. It was about the freedom to choose a meaningful career without worrying about rent money. It was about the space to heal from years of feeling inadequate and misunderstood. Jake visited me often during those early months. He helped me paint my new house and listened when I cried about missing my grandparents. He never once asked about the money or suggested ways I should spend it. His friendship became my anchor in a world that suddenly felt very different. I also started therapy, something I'd always wanted but never felt I could afford. Dr. Martinez helped me understand the difference between healthy family relationships and toxic family systems. She taught me about boundaries, manipulation tactics, and the difference between guilt and appropriate responsibility. 6 months after the inheritance, I received an unexpected visitor. Uncle Robert knocked on my door on a rainy Thursday afternoon, holding a cup of coffee and wearing a nervous smile. "I hope it's okay that I came," he said. "I got your address from your mom, though she wasn't happy about giving it to me." We sat in my living room, and for the first time in months, I felt connected to someone from my biological family. Robert apologized for not speaking up more forcefully during that awful family meeting. He explained that he'd been fighting his own battles with family expectations for years. "I understand why you made the choice you did," he said. "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. Your grandparents would be proud too." He told me that the family drama had continued long after I left. Mark and Dad had argued about who should contest the will. Lisa had accused everyone of being heartless about her financial struggles. Sarah had stopped speaking to her parents because she felt embarrassed by their behavior. "The funny thing is," Robert said, Fighting over your money has torn them apart, more than keeping it ever could have. They proved your grandparents right about how money changes people. Through Robert, I learned that my parents had told extended family that I'd cut them off over money. They painted themselves as victims of my greed and selfishness. The narrative they created made me the villain in a story where I was actually the victim. That hurt, but it also clarified something important. I couldn't control their story about me, but I could control my own story about myself. A year later, I was thriving in ways I never thought possible. My art therapy program was challenging and fulfilling. I'd made genuine friendships with classmates who knew nothing about my financial situation. I volunteered at a grief counseling center, helping people process loss and trauma. I also started a small foundation in my grandparents' memory, focusing on supporting young artists and writers who came from unsupportive family backgrounds. It felt like the perfect way to honor their belief in me while helping others who faced similar struggles. The foundation work connected me with amazing people who shared my values about creativity, authenticity, and using resources to help others rather than accumulate status symbols. These relationships felt fundamentally different from my family connections. They were based on mutual respect and shared interests rather than obligation and expectation. On the anniversary of my grandparents' death, I visited their graves alone. I brought flowers from my garden and told them about the life I was building with their gift. I thanked them for seeing something in me that I hadn't yet seen in myself. If you're struggling with family pressure or feeling like you don't fit into your family's expectations, please know that you're not alone. Building your own chosen family of supportive, authentic relationships is not only possible, it's essential for your emotional health. The money had given me options, but the real inheritance was the permission to be myself. 2 years have passed since that life-changing phone call, and I barely recognize the person I used to be. The scared, apologetic young woman who walked into that family meeting has been replaced by someone who knows her own worth and isn't afraid to protect it. My relationship with my parents remains strained, but has evolved into something more honest. Mom calls occasionally, usually around holidays, and our conversations are polite but distant. She's never directly apologized for that awful family meeting, but she's stopped pressuring me about the money. Dad and I exchange birthday texts and little else. It's sad, but it's also peaceful. Uncle Mark cut off all contact after his attempt to contest the will failed spectacularly. His lawyer quickly discovered that my grandparents had anticipated such challenges and structured the inheritance to be legally bulletproof. The whole experience apparently cost him substantial legal fees and considerable embarrassment within his social circle. Aunt Lisa and I have rebuilt our relationship slowly. She eventually apologized for pressuring me and admitted that her financial stress had made her behave in ways she wasn't proud of. I've helped with David's remaining student loans and Michael's college expenses, but on my terms and through my foundation rather than as family obligations. She understands now that generosity works best when it's freely given rather than demanded. Sarah and I will probably never be close, but we've reached a civil detente. She's successful in her medical career and has apparently learned to manage her finances more responsibly. She sent me a brief congratulations text when she heard about my foundation work. Uncle Robert has become my closest family connection. He visits regularly, and we've developed the kind of relationship I always wished I could have with my parents. He's supportive without being demanding, interested without being invasive. He's also started painting again, inspired partly by seeing how I'd found courage to pursue my authentic path. My chosen family has grown into something beautiful. Jake remains my closest friend and biggest supporter. My classmates from graduate school have become genuine companions who celebrate my successes and comfort me through challenges. The people I work with through my foundation share my values about service and authenticity. I've also started dating someone wonderful. Marcus is a teacher who values emotional intelligence over net worth, creativity over conventional success. He knew me for 6 months before learning about my financial situation, and when he did find out, his reaction was to ask how it felt to carry that responsibility rather than what I planned to buy next. The foundation has become my greatest source of pride and purpose. We've supported over 100 young artists and writers, providing grants, mentorship, and emotional support to people who face family rejection for pursuing creative careers. Every grant recipient reminds me why my grandparents trusted me with this inheritance. But the real transformation isn't about the money or the foundation or even the improved relationships. It's about the relationship I have with myself. I no longer apologize for existing. I don't seek approval for my choices or justify my decisions to people who don't respect my autonomy. I've learned that saying no to the wrong people creates space for the right people to enter your life. I think about my grandparents constantly, but the grief has transformed into gratitude. They gave me more than money. They gave me permission to disappoint people if necessary to remain true to myself. They taught me that inheritance isn't just about what you receive, but about what you choose to do with what you've been given. Sometimes people ask if I regret choosing the money over family relationships. The question always makes me sad because it misunderstands what actually happened. I didn't choose money over family. I chose self-respect over manipulation. I chose boundaries over exploitation. I chose authentic relationships over conditional ones. If you're facing pressure to compromise your values for family harmony, please remember that real harmony can't exist without mutual respect. If people only value you for what you can give them rather than who you are, they're not actually family in any meaningful sense. To everyone who's made it this far in my story, thank you for listening. Your comments and messages have meant more to me than you'll ever know. If this story resonates with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you're struggling with similar family dynamics, please know that choosing yourself isn't selfish. Sometimes it's survival. Hit like if this story moved you, subscribe for more real-life stories about family, money, and finding your authentic path, and share your own experiences in the comments. I read every single one, and your courage in sharing helps other people feel less alone. Remember, the best inheritance you can give yourself is the courage to be authentically you.